Thank you. I don't have my high shoes on today, so I feel short. Um, Thank you all for being here for this panel on young patients. I am not so young anymore, but I was when I was diagnosed. I was just 36 years old. I was a new mom with a 3-month-old baby and told I had 15 months to live. I looked at the doctor and said, no, I have to raise my child. What can you do for me? And thankfully, I was given the name of a specialist in Boston, and I had to travel across the country to see this specialist. And I had surgery, and it was successful. But I also missed the entire 6 month of my child's life. He was living with my parents at the time. They thankfully were able to take care of him while I was in Boston having surgery and fighting for my life. That child is now 19, and he's fantastic. So I'm glad to still be here. But at that time, being 36 years old, I was one of the youngest patients to be diagnosed with mesothelioma all those years ago. And in the last 19 years in doing advocacy, I've met so many more. And right here with me, I've got two, Loc and Jessica. So we're going to talk about a few different challenges that have faced young patients today. And the first one would be fertility and family planning, because that is really heavy on a lot of young patients and AYA patients. What do I do about kids, especially if you're diagnosed in your 20s? Like, can I have kids? Is that even a viable thing? I was told after my surgery to never get pregnant again, that if I did, it would probably endanger my life. So I'm thankful I have my one son. But I was never able to go in any fertility or preserve my eggs or anything. It was off the table. So I know these guys have some great input. So Jessica, I'll let you start.
Hello, my name is Jessica Blackford Cleaton. I was diagnosed with peritoneal mesothelioma when I was 32. I am 42 now, so it's been almost 10 years. And something that, Heather pointed out that I had struggled with was at that time was fertility. So I was newly married just for a few years. We were trying to have a baby, couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. Well, I had a bunch of cancer, and that's why. I was able to have HIPIC chemotherapy. About a year after that, decided that we would try for babies. Now, I will say when I was first diagnosed, I really kind of had to fight for that right to have my fertility preserved. The doctors are amazing, and my surgeon was amazing, my oncologist is amazing, but they are amazing at curing me, not what I would need in the future as far as fertility is concerned. So my surgeon was great. He's like, listen, if you want to do this, take a few months, see a fertility specialist, see if you can conserve some of your eggs, so you might have a chance afterwards. Well, I had too much involvement for them to be able to do that. So I basically begged my surgeon and said, if you can keep an ovary, if I have any chance. Now, if I'm going to die anyway, just take it. But if there's any chance at all, try to keep that intact. So he was great, was able to keep one. About a year after that surgery, everything was well enough that my husband and I made the decision to go forward with IVF and had our first son, Avery, 7 years ago. And then Elliot is now 5. So we've had 2 sons since, been very lucky. That is not an easy decision to make when you're someone in my position, not as a patient or as, a caregiver. Something that I talk about a lot, because even though there aren't a lot of younger patients, when there are, fertility is the last thing that they're thinking about. So it's always been very important to me that other patients know that you do have options, even when you're first diagnosed and people aren't really talking about it.
I have nothing to add there. So
Just wanted to give him the opportunity. So, and with a bunch of with younger patients, we do have younger kids at home usually. And I know that is the case with Loc. You have younger kids at home, don't you? So my baby was raised with me, it was part of the conversation forever. Mesothelioma has been part of his life since 3 months old. He doesn't know any different. So that is the conversation in our house. But Locke, maybe you can share with us how you deal with it with your kids.
It's nice to meet you. Also, I want to give some context in terms of what I'm going to share, because it's not just the people in this room. Going to the conference is my second year. There's a certain amount of survivorship bias, because these are the people that can afford to and also well enough to be at the conference. I know a lot of people are online at home, so I want to share with that, because I have friends that wanted to be here but they couldn't due to chemo schedules or whatever it may be. Regarding when I was diagnosed, I was 49, which is crazy to think that that's young for this disease, kind of a thing, because I feel old as hell. And then, I'm almost 52 now, so it's been about 3 years. And but at the time, we have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. I had a 7-year-old when I was diagnosed, 12-year-old who was doing the 12-year-old thing, which is really complicated, as far as the teenagers and stuff like that, a 15-year-old, and then an 18-year-old in college. So now they're both in college in terms of that. There was a lot of talk earlier about families and kind of like gatekeeping and when to share. Part of it is our parenting philosophy is just age-appropriate experiences for them. And so, because obviously for a 7-year-old, her ability to process what dad is going through and mom is going through is very different versus my 18-year-old. And so we tried to we were very open about it. Do you know what I mean? We didn't try to, you can't really hide it because you're going through chemo and stuff like that. And so, but obviously I didn't have like this deep talk with my 7-year-old and, say that dad's probably going to kick the bucket kind of a thing. Do you know what I mean? And so, but for my 15 and 18-year-old, they understood. And I'm not going to, they're extremely savvy. So there isn't like, oh, don't go Google stuff, right? And so it's impacted their lives, I think, in some ways positive. It made my son extremely motivated because he felt like he had to be the primary, caretaker for the home kind of a thing, right? And it's great. Like he got into an Ivy League. I'm like, good for you. Keep going. I don't tell him I'm not going to die kind of a thing because apparently it's working well for him. And so I'm like, go for it, dude. You know what I mean? So, I was like, do your investment banking, whatever the hell you want to do. So, yeah. But I think, but it's different for every kid.
Parenting 101.
Yeah, sorry. But for my 12-year-old, one of the challenges was that he was emotionally, probably one of our most challenging kids, going through it. And so my wife was just like, I don't want you to die because I can't deal with this kid by myself. Do you know what I mean? And part of it was like, I have to live just for that. So there are markers that you give yourself. And I think from my experience, there's what we call one-way door and two-way doors. Cancer and meso is a one-way door. Once you go through, there's no going back. But I think in terms of thinking through the disease in terms of 3-month increments and sprints, and there's a lot of two-way door things that you could kind of do and kind of come back from, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And try. And so you have to kind of figure that out. And then also figure out, I think someone shared about in that journey, there's different points and things change. And the way I talk to them about it now versus like then, especially when I thought I was given only 12 to 18 months, because that's what they all tell you kind of a thing. You know what I mean? And so it was just very different versus preparing for death and for the kids, especially I was the primary caregiver. That's a whole nother thing, is the whole money situation. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah.
Just to piggyback off of that, my sons grew up with it, obviously. So they used to go to appointments with me pre-COVID. They knew all the doctors, and they know mommy goes to appointments. They know mommy sees doctors. They know mommy is sick. I've said mesothelioma to them many times, and then 2 minutes later they'll forget. So they're just kind of at that age where they're not going to really remember. So you can't get much into it, but they know, and they've grown with it, and so they see it. And we've never really kept anything. Any questions that they have, they know they can ask.
Thank you. So another thing that we deal with, anybody who's under 65, usually even older, the work-life balance. I was in the prime of my career when I was diagnosed. I was part owner in a $3.5 million salon company. I know that's really hard to believe. I worked in a salon. And I had a thriving clientele, and that all went away immediately because there was no way I could work and continue to try and help people with one lung. So I ended up quitting my job, selling my salon, and going on disability, and that was really difficult. Somebody in the patient group had said, losing the career was almost worse than getting the cancer. And that's what I dealt with. And so thankfully I've been able to like pioneer my own path since then. But other people, I know, Loc, you work full time, and I know plenty of other young patients don't have the ability to quit their job like I did. So I'd like to hear your guys' experience with that.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think before I was diagnosed, I worked really hard at my career, traveled a lot with work. I was an executive there in state government, and you identify a lot with what you do, and you put a lot towards it. And after I was diagnosed, and for the year before I was diagnosed, working was very hard. I was using up all my sick time, not knowing why, and I had to eventually quit, and that was very hard, especially when you identify as that. And I still say it's very hard when people say, so what do you do? Yeah. And it's like, I'm just going to start saying I'm in the mob, because then it kind of, maybe it'll just shut it down. But then you have to get into explaining, well, I don't work and here's why, and then you get the sympathy, and then it's just like, no, it's okay. And it's a really hard conversation to have, especially with people you're just meeting. But yeah, the identity there is a big thing, and something that people don't really talk about, especially when you're that's what you do. You want to get ahead, and you want to get to a certain place, and have worked basically your whole life from college up to get somewhere, only to have it taken from you.
There's no right answer, I think, to this, so I can only share from my own experience. And that's another thing that's really weird about the disease. It's an orphan cancer, and so there's not a lot of people that have it, and then the information is like all over the place. You know what I mean? And so everyone says they're a specialist, even if they're not. Yeah. You know? And then you're like searching websites and stuff that you probably shouldn't. And so in terms of work, it was complicated. I'll just tell you from my perspective. I had 4 kids. I'm the primary wage earner or whatever. My wife is way more accomplished than me, smarter, all of it. But she chose to be a homemaker or whatever you want to call it. So it was like, I couldn't quit if I wanted to. And I actually worked all the way through chemo, right? So I did 11 rounds. And I was lucky in that the kind of job I had in sales, they don't really check on you. They just want to know that you're selling. You know what I mean? And so I could be playing video games all day for all they care, as long as I hit my numbers. And so, but I did have to eventually take a lesser role in the company. Luckily, like I was kind of like a made man already inside the company, so I could do whatever I wanted. But I took an easier role. I call it fake sales. And so I'm just an IC now, and I'm kind of chilling, doing my thing. And so, but yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm like, damn, I wish I could retire. So I think about it all the time. I hate to be that guy, but I'm like, yeah, man, I'm thinking about retirement all the time. So yeah.
If you haven't noticed, we all have like a really kind of twisted sense of humor.
Yeah.
And we laugh and we joke a lot about this stuff, because if we don't, we will go crazy. So yeah, we look at things through a very skewed eyesight on some things. But we're here and keep sharing because of it. So I don't know what that is. Anyways, so what a lot of people don't tell you when you're young is you need a will, you need a healthcare directive. I was writing a will at 36 years old, and that to me just seemed so just unreal, and it was very strange for me to go through that. But I have it. Oh, it's like I keep. There we go. So, those aren't things that you're prepared as a young parent or a young adult to have to deal with. So I kind of avoided it as long as I could until I went to Boston. Then I was like, I have to write a will, just in case something happened. Because I was filing a lawsuit, and I wanted to make sure that any proceeds from a lawsuit would go to my family. So, and that brings up another interesting aspect of being a young patient is, the will, the healthcare directive, and then the lawsuit implications due to our young age. we don't talk a lot about exposures, but it's very hard to determine when you're under 50. So, they work really hard to make sure that they represent us well. But, it's like the wills, the healthcare directives. How did you guys handle all that?
I think at first I was just kind of stuck in auto mode. It was like everything being thrown at you, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and it was just another step. I think the first thing that really came were the medical directives, like the DNRs, and I don't even remember. I do remember later on, I think after the birth of my first son, which is when I really sat down and did a will, which was stupid. I should have done it right after I was diagnosed, before I had the kid, now that I think about it. But it's so important. Life insurance, too. It's something that we don't think about until we need to. And unfortunately, after you're diagnosed with something, trying to get life insurance is so hard. So I always tell people, get life insurance when you can, when it's cheap. Because you have to think about, after you're gone, the people that you're leaving behind. And something else you need to think about is how that money is going to be dispersed. And if you don't have anything in place, the government can disperse it in ways that it wants to, and you don't have that decision, and where your kids go, and there's just so much to think about. So my thing is just always get a good lawyer, someone that really works on this and knows what they're doing. Talk to family members that have been through it, friends and family members that can recommend people. But it's very important to have in place. And I know it's just one of the last things that you want to think about, because what you're thinking about is your health and getting better, or just anything else besides that. But it's something that needs to be done.
This is a really hard topic to talk about, because when you're sick and you're younger, even when you're older, you're dealing with, think of it like spinning 12 plates, and then you get the cancer, and then like 8 of those plates are cancer. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that get dropped, and you have to kind of think through things. And so I was juggling a full-time job, chemo, a lawsuit, and then you're dealing with insurance, right? So, because insurance doesn't want to pay out. And even if they're supposed to pay out, they're sending like nasty grams and sending us to collections, even though we never even got the bill, kind of a thing. Do you know what I mean? And so you're dealing with all 4 of those, and it's a lot. So I would also recommend that not just a will, but you really have to do a trust. And so, and then from the settlement, as far as a lawsuit, we actually had to create trusts with guardian ad litems for the younger kids. And so, and then you have to kind of think through, prenups for them and other things like that. So these are all discussions. My own scenario, I have a genetic situation with BAP. And so that means that my kids are 50-50. And that all BAP is that it's kind of like, what's the one with, the breast cancer one, BRCA, right? Where you have a greater propensity toward, mesothelioma if you're exposed to asbestos. So we haven't had that conversation with our kids. I could say this online because I know they're never going to find this damn thing, right? And so, what do you call it? They are savvy, though. Nah, dude, they're not that savvy. No, they're too into themselves. So, but no, I think.
Famous last words.
Yeah, I know, right? No, but what was I talking about? Yeah, they. Excuse me.
Sorry.
Oh no, not at all. So, but I think you got to think through those things with them. So there's that piece of it. But I definitely do a trust, not just a will kind of a thing, because you have to deal with the assets. So, and then estate planning if you have that issue.
So another thing that we deal with is, what if you're single? What if you're young and you get diagnosed and you're single? Do you tell your potential partners that you're going through this? Do you even have energy to date? There's so many weird things that happen. I was married for 7 years, so that was different. But a lot of marriages don't last a diagnosis, especially in the AYA community. They don't last. Divorce is extremely high in younger diagnosis. I'm happy to say my husband is fantastic and glad he's still with me. I'm hard to live with. I don't know how he stays, but relationships, not just dating and marriage relationships, but friendships too. People you think are your friends don't stay around, and I witnessed that a lot. I was part owner in the salon company, and everybody I worked with were my greatest friends until I got sick. I never heard from them. They accused me of faking it because I didn't lose my hair during chemo. So it's like, I literally lifted my shirt up and said, yeah, I'm faking it, and, show 'em my big scar. And things like that really hurt, and they don't teach you how to navigate that as a young cancer patient. Nobody talks about that. So I don't know if you guys had anything with relationships, any wisdom you can share.
There you go.
So I was also married, my diagnosis, but I mean, we had some deep conversations about it, and I told him, I'm like, we're barely married, we don't have any kids, this is your out. Like, just get out. It's gonna be really hard. And he's just like, no way. Great guy, but it's not been easy by any means. There's, when your partner becomes your caregiver, there's a huge change there. And it's things that we've had to work through and continue to work through. But as friends, and I completely agree with you, Heather, there are some people that just cannot deal with it. And it's sad and it's heartbreaking that you've known people for so long, that they just don't know what to say or what to do, and then just eventually they just kind of disappear. They always say a cancer diagnosis shows you who your true friends and families are, and that's absolutely true. I still have some of the greatest friends, but I have some people I barely even talk to anymore since diagnosis. And that's just part of it. And sometimes you just have to let those people go, because it's more fight that you don't need to deal with that. You don't need that drama anyway. So.
Amen to that. Bye. So, yeah, I mean, I think for us, we're also in a faith community, and we've got a lot of I like to think of relationships in terms of circles. I mean, you have your inner circle with your spouse, your family, your close friends, and then kind of the outer ring, so to speak. We did have proxies for us to kind of handle as champions, so we weren't inundated in terms of, that kind of a thing. I'll be honest, I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of relationships because I'm in sales through work, literally thousands, and it's just overwhelming. Do you know what I mean, in terms of that? And so, but you're right. People you expect to be there for you, like family, are not. And then some people, truthfully, even with my own kids, some I think felt like they're closer to their mom now because they feel like she's going to be around versus I'm not, kind of a thing. And I'm inferring that somewhat, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And one thing I would encourage, I think 100%, 1,000%, is you have to go through therapy. So find a good therapist. I'm a Christian, and I'm a dude, so I was like, I'm never gonna do therapy. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, I don't have time for this shit. And so, pardon my French, I shouldn't say that. I'm in a conference, but you do though, because us guys, we're not super self-aware. Do you know what I mean? All the things that my wife is going through as a caregiver, dealing with the fear of being alone for a long time. It's not like we lived our whole life, and it's like, okay, there's a few years left, whatever, peace out. But you're talking decades left, right? And so, and then just all of that. So I think therapy has been incredibly helpful, giving me vocabulary to kind of process things, draw boundaries, all of that. And so be a better spouse, be a better dad, be a better friend. So, and by the way, these women are incredible. One of the greatest things about going through this whole stupid disease and meeting some wonderful people. And Heather, you never introduced me to your husband. So I was like, do you have a husband?
I do have
Okay, because you never introduced me to him. So anyway, but they're wonderful. And so I love, I just respect them so much.
On the down low and on,
I hear you. I hear you. Because he's never here, dude. So anyway, yeah.
So years ago, I met a gentleman named Ted. The old timers here remember Ted. Ted told me on the third day of the symposium, my very first one, he's like, Heather, mesothelioma is the shittiest way to meet the best people. And he was so right. And I have found this community to fill that spot from those people who left me high and dry. I've made lifelong friends. Whenever Jessica comes to the Twin Cities, we get together, we meet at the Mall of America. And, I used to go to St. Louis for a race and we would get together then. So I've been really fortunate to meet amazing people in this community that have filled those spots, and we are family here. And I don't say excited is probably the wrong word, but I'm glad is the wrong word, trepidatiously happy to see a lot of new people here, because the community, we're only as strong as the community that we are involved with, and you guys are the future of this community. So having so many participants and having people here, and especially you watching on the live stream, we'll be here for you when you need us. And that's what I want to get out about being a young survivor, is find your group, find your community. And that's why this organization is so very important. I don't know, I guess I could,
That's a great
we can just end with that. We can answer any questions. If anybody has any questions for us about anything. Nope. There's lots of wisdom here. Anybody here who's dealt with this has wisdom, whether you're newly diagnosed, whether you've been around it for 2 decades like I have. And so talk with one another and get to know people. That's why we're here. So thank you for attending, and we'll see you later.